So, if I may ask you to take the chair again, we will continue. I have asked to prepare the coffee in advance for the next intermission, that we would not, you would not have to wait so long. And now we will switch to the second panel of today's seminar or conference. The first one was about the interest, and one of the arguments was that we have to awake into a certain reality. So there were the honeymoon in Czech-American relations. It were transformed into a kind of a marriage. Then there was a hangover, and because nobody is interested in the divorce, we have to awake into a maturity. And for older among us, the maturity in the marriage, it's a friendship without the sex. So,
speak for yourself.
Vladimír is a young. So, occasionally, that was exactly the feeling among many of us, that great talks, but if we come into the substance, occasionally it looks like an empty bottle. And because the real relations are not about the words, the big declaration, not even about the great values, but it's also, maybe most of all, about the money or resources. So that's the reason why I believe that to submit the real number and the assessment where we are in the field of economy, trade, investment is maybe more important than anything else. When we had our first meeting in Washington, so we had a paper available written by a young Czech economist, Lukáš Vondra. I don't know whether he is among us today. He was definitely invited. Today, we are very glad to have as three real important people to testify where we are right now in this arena. And the first speaker today, it's, I think, somebody really qualified, a man who did participate personally on building this relationship in the era of honeymoon, Minister of Economy and then Industry and Trade throughout the early and middle 1990s. A man who then was broadly experienced in working with a major US investment bank, Goldman Sachs in Prague and in Central and Eastern Europe. A man who is a long-time member and participant on behalf of the Czech Republic in the Trilateral Commission, so this famous meeting place where the Americans, Europeans, and also Japanese are regularly meeting. A man who was running also for the president, and currently a man who is a president of the Czech Chamber of Commerce, Vladimír Dlouhý. So, Vladimír, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sasha. I hope I can still say good morning. Thank you very much for the invitation. And I'm an economist who, by education, I'm always saying the only thing that I know a little bit is macroeconomics. So I'm going to give a little bit a macroeconomic overview shortly of the US and more on the Czech Republic. And I believe that both Mr. Stračár and Weston, they are better than me ever of the more detailed relations, economic trade and investment relations between Czech Republic and the United States. I'm a former politician, so if, Sasha, you tell me to speak 2 minutes, I speak 2 minutes. If you tell me 20, I'm going to speak 20, but if I speak too long, let me know. I hope that this device works. Let me start this. These are the main export partners of the Czech Republic. And what do we see? That we are a country, there are not very many countries in the world which are so much dependent on one particular market, namely Germany in our case. Is there also a pointer? If not, it's okay, it's obvious, yeah. Germany, thank you, Weston. You also see the US, which is very much down the scale. It's about 5%, and it didn't change before the crisis in January 2007, which is the red column, and the beginning of 2013, which is the blue column. These data are a little bit delayed, so I don't have for 2014, but I don't expect much change. So this shows where the US stands in our to our exports, and it also we see how important is one particular country. The rest of the world is much lower than Germany. However, there are two countries which are more important than we would see from this comparison, and this is China and the US. Because through Germany and other countries in the Eurozone, namely France, Austria, Britain, and more Netherlands, Italy, to these two countries, the Czech exports are being exported as a part of the completion, obviously, unfortunately for us, giving the higher content of value added. And according to the analysis which we have tried to do in the framework of the former National Economic Council, it surprisingly in the last years, it's more US than China, which is important. If you look, and I don't have the graphs here, if you look at the German exports to China, I don't want to speak about a fall, but there was a certain slowdown of the dynamics of the German exports to China, while the US is becoming more and more important for Germany. So US and China via Germany are becoming also very important to us. So the economic development in the US is obviously quite important. This is just the, there is a pointer. Just to show what are the expectations about US economic growth and what are the expectations about the European economic growth. You basically see the difference with all the problems which US is facing. It is clear that the United States has gone through the recession, and recovery is much stronger than in the euro area. Germany within the euro area is doing slightly better, and this is the most important country for us. But again, compared to the US, you see much slower dynamics. This is particular growth in 2013 and 2014, and compared to the potential growth of those economies. You see that it is expected because the US economic potential slowed down a little bit after the Great Recession, and US in 2014 is expected to grow well a little bit above its potential, while Europe is more or less on its potential. But the main thing is that the potential growth of the US is substantially larger than within the euro area. Not speaking about other parts of the world. And this clearly shows that we, being the European country, crucially dependent on development in Europe, we are, as the Czech Republic, unfortunately probably stay within the problem of the last decade the Eurozone is facing, which also something says to the expected Czech growth, which I'm going to speak about a bit later. But this message is quite clear. The strength of the US economy and the potential seems, after the crisis, to be stronger than of Europe and by implication of the Czech Republic. Had not been for a relatively low share of the United States in Czech exports, that would be definitely a good news, but we still must hope that at least via Germany we will also enjoy some benefit from this fact. And just let me give you, you could have chosen a whole plethora of different slides or parameters to show. I believe that what is important for the US economy is that we have quite an important and decisive impulse from the private sector. You see that, especially in 2009, namely the private sector had to adjust to the need of the leveraging and the consequences of the recession. And this lasted basically after 2010, but we see a strong recovery of the private sector. Obviously, a tightening in the US budget and all the discussion about budgetary issues had some impact, but we see that this is probably the most important thing, that the private sector is on the recovery. And within the private sector, probably the most important is the housing recovery. This is the estimated effect of housing on annual real GDP growth. Residential investment is the dark blue. This stems from the normal GDP growth. Then mortgage withdrawal effect is on consumption is another indirect and wealth effect. So you see that we really see a substantial recovery in the sector which has been hit most by the financial crisis. But if you look at also the fiscal sector, basically in terms of public spending, we saw difficult years. In 2011, the introduction of the Budget Control Act, all the discussion about sequestration, there was a partial governmental shutdown, and I believe that in the public sector 2014 is the first year where we will see bouncing back from the cuts. There seems to be a political consensus on the longer-term cut, and despite obviously a big problem in the discussion within the United States in both Congress and Senate, I still believe that the U.S. economy is, even in terms of the impetus from the public sector, on the growth trajectory. And as I said, I believe the same applies for the consumer spending. I do not have very much slides about the capital spending and gross capital formation, but we believe with both public and consumer spending improved, acceleration in capital spending will take place as well. That's for the US, because that would require else, I would say, a separate discussion. So I just made a discussion very, very short. Let me move to the Czech Republic. This is the GDP growth seasonally adjusted. Red line is year on year, blue line is quarter on quarter. And we see that after the recovery, after the first fall of after the global crisis, there was a recovery 2010 till the mid 2011, and with the second European crisis, namely the problems with Italy, there was a recession, and indeed Czech Republic went through the 6 consecutive quarters of recession. Everybody in Europe slowed down. The question is, and while I'm here speaking to anybody else than the former Prime Minister Nečas, who was running the Czech government in these difficult years, the main question which the economists ask is not about the recession itself, but why the Czech recession was so deep compared also to our neighbors. This is part of the explanation. This is the growth structure of the annual GDP growth structure. The black line is the GDP annual growth, and the columns are contribution to this growth in percent. Everything is seasonally adjusted. And obviously, these 4 colors are important. Household consumption, the red columns, which represent between 65 to 70% of aggregate demand. And we see that in those difficult years in 2012-13, it was the household demand which went substantially down. The same applied for the gross capital formation. Government consumption also has been suppressed due to the need to keep the economy facing the fall of the revenues, to keep the economy, public finance under control. And at the beginning, these were the net exports, that means export minus import, namely to Germany and other Eurozone countries, which kept the growth, at least at the beginning, above zero. But when Germany, and at the end of 2012 and beginning 2013, when Germany and other Eurozone countries slowed down in their growth as well, you see that then we received the biggest fall. This is the central bank forecast in its latest inflation report, and we see rather positive news that since beginning of 2014, this is the first real data, this is already estimated, these are the forecasts, that all the most important components of the aggregate demand will generate positive contribution to the total growth, which however should not go over 3%, despite the fact that I believe Czech economy after 2015-16 has potential to grow faster than 3%. Still, it's a big question whether we will achieve it. And expectation that we would come back to those great convergence years before the crisis, before 2007, where we witnessed 4, 5, almost 6% growth in particular years. This will not repeat, and it's a part of what I'm calling a lost decade for the Eurozone. I can go now quickly. This is the real household and government consumption. This just shows the fact which we have discussed already on the previous slide. This again is the gross capital formation, and you see the same pattern of dynamics in all the cases. After the global crisis 2008-9, recovery slowed down, and some recovery at the beginning 2014, with the expectation that this is going to continue. Before moving on, let me just make a comment. The question is, why Czech households did spend so less than others in Poland or in Slovakia or elsewhere? Why was the Czech business sector so risk aversive? As a matter of fact, risk aversive are the households as well. Well, there are several explanations. Generally, a high risk aversion for the Czech society. There can be a talk about we are in the political cycle and we are somewhere down in the political cycle. The society mistrusts the politicians, be it on the left or on the right. The society has been probably too much massaged by the negative expectation about future, etc., etc. But I have asked my analytical colleagues at the Czech Chamber of Commerce recently to make a comparison between Czech Republic, Poland, and Slovakia. We are not finished yet, but interesting thing, if you look at the loans for households between 2010 and 13 in Poland and Czech Republic, there was a 22% increase in Poland and 4% increase in loans to households in the Czech Republic, which I'm not saying it's the only explanation, but it is definitely a truth that the Polish households were much more open to accept the loans, and Polish households were also less risk aversive, not only in spending, but also in spending on the debt. And the increase of the Polish households in that period of indebtedness is much stronger than the increase of indebtedness of the Czech households, which again is not very much discussed. And Poland is a country which is riding on the wave of the general popularity. The elites are, I would say, much more compact in Poland than in the Czech Republic. But at the same time, the Polish households are more indebted, substantially more than the Czech households, and about 50 to 55% of the loans to Polish households are still denominated in foreign currency. It is not like in Hungary, where this is more than 80%, but it's much more than, for instance, in Czech Republic, which makes obviously also the future situation in repayment loans for the Polish households more vulnerable to the movement of exchange rate. I wish Poland, this is not about jealousy that we are suffering and Poles are doing better. I just try to find out not to repeat eventual economic policy mistake, what was the reason of such a deep recession of the Czech Republic compared to other countries in the region? Real exports and imports, you see that we really suffered in 2013, but again, we believe that the real net exports, which is the black column, which is the difference between the exports and imports, and it's a change in billion crowns on the right-hand vertical axis, will now indeed improve substantially. Well, that definitely clearly says something about the strengths of the Czech economy in terms of its external relation. Something which we could discuss probably for a week or months. This is the monetary policy of the central bank. Let me just only say that this is the inflation target. Our central bank, like all other countries with the exception of Fed in developed countries, basically are exercising inflation targeting. There was a mutual agreement not only within the economists but in the society that 2% inflation target on annual basis is the right one. And if we look at both headline inflation and the monetary policy relevant inflation, this is the headline inflation minus indirect taxes, we indeed have seen a substantial drop in inflation. And after the so much questioned and criticized intervention of Czech central bank against the exchange rate of the Czech crown, especially vis-a-vis euro, there is an expected rebound and return on inflation around 2015 or back to the inflationary target. This is adjusted in the blue is net inflation is headline inflation minus indirect taxes minus regulated prices impact. But what is interesting about people, especially journalists who are blindly criticizing central bank should look at, this is adjusted inflation excluding fuels. So this is the headline inflation, total inflation, minus fuels, minus foodstuff, minus indirect taxes, minus regulated prices. So blue line is the inflation which really stems from the real characteristics of the Czech economy. And we were, since the beginning of 2010, if we put all the impacts which are influenced by external views, basically the price of the foodstuff is influenced by the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. The price of fuels is dependent on the price of oil on the world market, etc., etc. So if we put away all these influences, this country has been basically in deflationary period since the beginning of 2010. This is the way where I base a certain defense of Czech National Bank in terms of its monetary policy. Obviously, if we want to open the discussion about inflation targeting as such, and this is more or less a conservative soil, this institute, so I would believe that we should be ready here to discuss whether inflation targeting is already not an over, something which is over, and we should find out, the discussion should start about a complete change in the paradigm of the monetary policies of the central banks in the developed countries. Okay, I'm fine with that. The literature is full of it. But I'm at the same time saying that hardly Czech central bank of a small country in Central Europe can be at the vanguard at the beginning of such a discussion when ECB is performing inflation targeting, where all other important central banks in the developed world are performing inflation targeting. This is labor market forecast, annual changes, general unemployment on the right-hand vertical scale, 6%, even today, between 6 and 7. This is according to the EU methodology. Let's be frank, this country has a relatively quite a low unemployment. Let's be frank about that. Number of employees and also hours work of employees, this is the reaction for the crisis. In the crisis that, as a matter of fact, number of employees in the crisis increased, but hours work per employee substantially dropped. This reflects all what we call a Schwartz system and shortening of the working hours, etc., etc. And if you recount it on on the full-time equivalent, you really see a substantial drop in employment. This is not nice because that beverage curve, it's maybe too professional concept, but just to explain, beverage curve is the relation between number of unemployed people and number of vacancies, and it is downward sloping, convex, but the closer it is to the origin, the better people who are unemployed find a job. And unfortunately, in the crisis years, this is the part of the beverage curve between beginning of 2013 and this is, I think, this is August already. Well, we are, sorry, I think it's June 2014, and we see the beverage curve moving a little bit out of the origin. That really shows probably that there are difficulties in finding the job. Household saving rate. This reflects the fact that still relatively the saving rate in the Czech economy is relatively high. There was some drop after the second crisis, but it is expected to grow. That's why the Governor Singer in the Euro interview a couple of days ago, I think last but one issue, speaks about still high saving rate in the Czech Republic. This is selection, this is forecast of selected variable. I just leave it for you to consider relatively low unemployment and other things. Current account balance in terms of GDP percentage fully under control. Fiscal forecast, government budget balance is very low in terms of GDP ratio. Public finance balance is obviously higher, but still already now below 3%, and government debt is very low. And this is the balance of payment forecast, current account fully under control, and all financial account as well. So even as I have already mentioned, the relations, external relations are fully stabilized. Well, if you speak to analysts from international institutions like IMF, OECD, or World Bank, or if you speak to the analysts in the big international financial institutions, or big private financial institutions, if they speak about Czech Republic at all, because they namely follow the Central European region and maybe Poland or Hungary, because Hungary was facing much more difficulties. But if they speak about Czech Republic at all, they say, okay, this is the boring economy. Everything is fine. You have low unemployment. You have low debt. You have control of public finance. You have balance of payment fully under control. Your central bank on the trend rate is increasing the foreign exchange reserve. You have a relatively good infrastructure. So what the hell you Czechs are complaining about? You have corruption? Well, that exists everywhere, etc., etc. Well, I'm saying, well, we are missing one small thing, and this is growth. And this is the political issue. And this basically, obviously, opened the questions about the future development. How this fits into the economic policy, how this fits into the US-Czech economic relation. Economic policy, I must be now impartial because I'm president of the chamber, which is considered to be a non-political body. I must now live with the existing government, so I know their economic policy, even their views, both from the tripartite meeting and meeting particular ministers, even prime minister, etc. I obviously know the governmental program. Because I had to go to some TV discussion on Sunday, so Saturday evening, Sunday morning, I downloaded the latest ODS 14 points program, which has been approved on the latest ODS Congress. I know basically the program of Top 09. If you compare governmental economic policy blueprint and ODS and Top 09, there is definitely a subset of always the same things. There is a core, and this is truth. And this is truth not only for the Czech Republic, it's truth for Europe. To quote Jean-Claude Juncker, who already at the beginning of the crisis in 2009, I'm not a big fan of him, but this is a very nice quotation. He basically said, we all know what to do, only we don't know how to do it to be elected next time. Yeah. And this is the magic, that there is some subset of the necessary steps which all the governments must follow. And I would only repeat the slogans about infrastructure, education, keeping the macroeconomic stability, etc. And there are the differential specifica of the socialist, minimal wage, something which I opposed very much in the internal discussion, which has that terrible, awful German name, Kurzarbeit, etc. And then there is a business sector. And let's again be frank, I don't know whether this is off the record or on the record, Sasha. But again, becoming a president of the chamber, I reconfirmed something which I learned a long time ago. Business people, despite the fact that mostly they say they are the voters who vote center-right parties, they are socialists by their very, very internal feeling. Most of the business people like the government which provides the subsidies, which provides the selected policies, which is more active in distributing the funds, which is very socially minded, etc. So not everybody is like that. Export promotion and all this stuff. So this is another issue which must be taken into account and find some balance. But in the nutshell, without going into the detail, I strongly believe that this country has a potential, and that something which is considered which was considered as a kind of a break back in 2012 and 2013, namely macroeconomic stability. Whenever we will unbreak this economy, I believe after 2015-16, and this government to some extent unjustly will enjoy the happy momentum, I believe that the Czech economy has a very strong potential, which might be well above 3%, even within the last decade of the Eurozone. How it fits with the US relation, it very much depends how we will be able to perform the structural changes to generate higher share of the more higher value added components in our production. But let's also be frank, and let me finish here. The US is more remote, important economy, but the positive effects will be rather indirect than direct. To what extent Czech economy can be important for the US, allow me not to speculate about that, and let's stay firmly down on the earth. Also, US is not very much ahead in terms of FDIs. There are other countries which were very active here. But nevertheless, I believe that it is our partner, it is our political partner, and I'm sure it's going to remain a strong economic partner as well. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Vladimír. That was the real economic outlook and the assessment. Originally, I was hoping a bit more, to get more numbers from the Czech-US business, but I guess Stacey will do that. But before I will pass the floor to Stacey, just a small comment, maybe to follow this praxis started by Wes Mitchell. To prepare yourself to respond to the first question. You have portrayed the Czech economy in the numbers in the era of this W crisis, the two, in fact, consecutive recession, in which, the Czech's economy was not so much hit in the first stage, this banking crisis, but was relatively more hit in the second part of this general Western or mostly the European crisis. And that the outcome is, what you have said, that on one hand, the economy is boring in order, in fact. So the foundation for renewal and the growth are laid down well. On the other hand, that the reason why we were hit more than some others in the second half of the crisis was due to consumers not spending enough, And you made a comparison with the Poles, where the numbers are different, and explaining this. On one hand, that the Poles are more optimistic, more risking, while the Czechs, beyond their traditional skepticism, are a classic, saving nation like the Germans. And now why I'm talking about this, because it can have some consequence also in the security arena, what we were talking about the previous panel. On one hand, the portrait of the Poles as a fighters, demanders, spenders. On the other hand, the role of the Czech in the transatlantic community as a warning voice, skeptical voice, the tendency to certain relativism. At the same time, in what they are doing this well and in a perfect way, like in Afghanistan, we were not asking for any caveats, and etc. So, you were trying to explain this difference by, the questioning whether the government, where I was part of that, was, doing enough to awake the Czech consumers. But, here my question is whether this is not rather the much more deeply tendency rooted in the Czech society, with which no government, no president in the past or the future basically can do or substantially change. So that would be my question, but think about the response. And now we'll go back to the speakers. I maybe would ask now Stacey first, because he's here, representing AmCham, so the lobbying organization of the American companies, to give us a certain assessment from the U.S. perspective, and maybe even from Stacey perspective, because you are here, from what I remember, so you are not American anymore, I guess. But whether you could add up with some, I don't know whether you have the numbers or whether you would have some generalization. And then we will end with Peter Stračár as a voice of one of the major companies. So may I follow that order, Wes, please?
Okay. This is a very dangerous seminar for me, because I read the paper about the Czech relationship and the U.S. relationship being a marriage. And I've been married to a Czech woman for 20 years, so I'm sort of a physical representation of that marriage. So this morning I got up, I woke up and I turned to my wife and I said, "Should we still be married?" And her response was, "Yes, and thank you for asking, but you still have to take the dog out." So, which I think is a little bit relevant to what we're talking about today. I was very interested in the discussion that took place before this one about the strategic interest of the U.S. and the Czech Republic, and I missed one thing, which I think we have a very deep strategic interest that both of us share, which is that both of the people of these countries want their society to be democratic, both in politics and economy. And we tend to lose sight of that in discussions about security and other issues. But that's sort of a day-to-day interest that both of us have. And I think sometimes Mr. Dlouhý and Mr. Vondra and Mr. Nečas, who I saw here, get a little bit irritated with me about when we are going to the government, because they say that we are being critical of the Czech Republic, or equally critical of the United States. If you've seen the work of the U.S. Chamber in the United States, we very much want there to be a democratic society. We very much want there to be a free market economy, which is the democratic version of economic development. And so that's why we work the way that we do, and the way that we do is we openly talk about the issues that we think will make both societies more successful both economically and politically in that regard. So let me talk a little bit about what we think has been happening over the last few years. What did the crisis do? Because the crisis was a huge shock to the system. In terms of the economy of the Czech Republic, I think it actually did a lot of good. One, you see a lot more entrepreneurship these days. If you go out, especially on the streets of Prague, you see a lot more small shops being opened by managers who had to leave the foreign multinationals or the other places that they're working. So there's a lot of more small businesses out on the street. There's more competitive pricing within the industry. If you talk to a lawyer these days, if you talk to a consultant, they will tell you that their jobs have become a lot tougher since the crisis. So the pricing for value has become much more apparent in the market, and the marketing ability and the desire of people to match their product with the desire of the customer has increased dramatically. So I think in the business sector, you can say that the crisis, although it was very difficult for everyone, had a very positive effect on the Czech economy. And as Mr. Dlouhý said, I think that there's a potential in the market to really have the economy grow at a much faster pace than it has been in the past. So the question then is, will it? And will the government adopt policies that promote that growth, or will they adopt policies that will restrict that growth? And so there are some areas that we think that the government would really need to look at to really produce the type of growth that the Czech Republic deserves and can achieve. The first is value-added manufacturing. You mentioned it, that a lot of the Czech export goes to Germany, and it's component export. It's building a part that goes into a German product that is then sold on abroad. We think a lot more of the value added in each product that's produced here could be moved to the Czech Republic. Here's a good example of somebody who's building an aircraft engine in the Czech Republic, and that's a very high value added product. The other product that I will mention is the hospital beds made by Linnet, also a very high value added product. And that's the type of manufacturing we need to support. And there are policies that need to be put in place that will generate that type of growth. But that's one of the big areas that I think that this government needs to look at. And Peter, you might talk more about that. The second, and I forgot who mentioned it, is research. This is, Jerzy mentioned it. This is a country that its future is based on its people more than its natural resources. And the government's research policy needs to be adapted to make sure that when they spend money on those people, that there is a good outcome. And that is not based on whether it is basic research or applied research. That's a fictitious or fallacious argument. It has to be good research. It has to be research that has some goal in mind, and that goal has to be the generation of something good for society. And so we think that the research policy, and we hope that we can work with the Economic Chamber, needs to be changed from a subsidy for science to an investment in the prosperity and security of the country. And there are many areas where that can happen. And then finally, it's the topic that we've been, I think, overly associated with, which is public procurement. The reason that we talked about public procurement is because public procurement is the single largest pool of transactions in any country. I think it represents something like 30% of the overall transactions. And it sets the tone for the competitiveness of society. And we think it's not the ease with public procurement is done, but the effectiveness of the final outcome, which is important, which means that the process needs to be done in such a way that the government is choosing the best product, not the lowest price product, but the best product for the outcome it deserves, or that it's trying to achieve. And that's why we've been involved in public procurement. We're about halfway to the goal now. I think the law itself is okay, but the implementation is where there needs to be more work. And I will also say that I know that one of the big complaints of the Czech Republic about the U.S. and TTIP is the public procurement process at the municipal level in the U.S. There's a lot of Buy USA provisions. That's going to be a difficult thing to address through TTIP because it's national to national, but it is a valid argument that the Czech Republic has, and it's something that we want to work with them through the U.S. Chamber to solve. Numbers. Numbers are always a bit deceptive. If you look at I think the key number for the Czech Republic is not export to the U.S., but investment from the U.S. And maybe even investment into the U.S. Investment from the U.S. If you look at the only number that's sort of reliable, which is the Czech National Bank number, it's based on monetary flow. So it means it's based on where the money came from. So in that regard, the IBM investment that was made here is from Cyprus. The Philip Morris investment is from Amsterdam. And so it's very difficult to get a true reading on what the U.S. investment is, but somewhere between number 2 to number 4. German investment is obviously the highest. And I think that will increase. The type of investment that will come now is mid-level. Most of the big guys are here already. So you're looking at small, relatively small, mid-sized U.S. companies that have very little experience in outside markets. So the markets need to be transparent. They need to have as little risk as possible, and so that's what we're working on. In terms of investment into the U.S., there's much more than there was. I mean, you saw the number. It's a relatively low number. The Czech Republic is probably never going to be the biggest investor in the United States. But if you look at where Czech investments were 10 years ago to where they are today, it's a very rapidly increasing number, led by companies like Linet and Ysoft from Brno. And that is done basically on a business-to-business level. And so we're very positive about both the economic relationship between the U.S. and the Czech Republic, but also the relationship between people. I mean, it's not just the fact that I've been able to stay married to my wife for 20 years, but there's a real strong bond between the Czech desire to be free and to be unencumbered by their government and the U.S. attitude towards its government. And I think that is the foundation of the relationship. And it's one that's getting stronger with every day.
Thank you very much. So maybe also to prepare a question for you, to think about. You have mentioned this, the final statement about, the increase of the Czech investment in the U.S., while stagnation or maybe even a relative decrease of this U.S. investment here, explaining this, that the domicile is, not necessary in the United States, but in Cyprus or Netherlands or wherever. But I would see a general trend if I go to the strategic areas of industry like energy, telecommunication, or even banking sector, the gradual departure of the major U.S. companies, not necessarily only from the Czech Republic, but generally from the Central European region. So you cannot explain this by the Czech specifics. It's I think, Central European wide. So think about the reasons. What are the reasons? And now,
this is an energy company, potential energy company.
one noble exception. I hope that they will not sell the bank to the Russians. There was some information a couple of months ago. But the noble exception, certainly, I wanted to have a representative of some major US company being active in our country as well as in Central Europe general. And I am very glad to have here Peter Stračár. In particular, you know, he even did not refuse to come, although he has broken the leg, seriously broken the leg a couple of weeks ago, and despite his limited movement possibilities, he gladly responded to my request that he's going to come here. Peter Stračár is a Slovak serving for the various multinational corporations around the world before joining GE more than a year ago and becoming CEO for not just the Czech Republic but the whole Central and Eastern Europe. I remember very well his father, Slavomír Stračár, was the Federal Ministry of Industry and Trade in the first post-communist Czechoslovak government in 1990. So, working together with Vladimír Dlouhý for opening this then Czechoslovak market still for the outside competition and helping the country to transform the economy in general from the command economy into the market one. So deep tradition, deep knowledge. So please tell us something about your experience, you know, working for the major US company here, and what are the positives, and when we should improve to make the bond stronger.
So could you hear me, please? Yeah. So look, I will keep it short because I think lunch is coming, and the last thing you want to listen is man with a broken leg, right? So you know, so people say sport is healthy, not all the time. And there was a lot of talking about marriage. I will come to marriage as well. It seems to be a pretty popular theme today. So I don't know how much you know about GE, because here GE is associated with GE Money Bank, but GE is much more than that. So first part is the selling, right? It's my job actually. So, you know, we are not American company. That's what people believe. GE is an American company. We are not. We are a global company having a head office in the United States, or some of the head offices in the United States. And out of the 300,000 employees, they work for the company. We generate $150 billion revenue globally. 95,000 are in Europe, right? And we have 3 global head offices in Europe. We have numerous manufacturing. So it is not only about export or investment data. It is much more about overall economic value, what the company creates in the territory, and GE is in marriage with Europe, because it is second biggest piece of geography from the business point of view, and also all major acquisitions, if you recall, in the last years were done in Europe. Avio, which was a big aviation company, now everybody speaks about Alstom, which will add another 20,000 people to our head office, is major European energy company. So we are heavily entrenched in the Europe. Now, coming to Central Europe, and we speak, and I speak more about Central Europe than just about individual countries, because, and I maybe later explain you also reason why, from the perspective of the investor. So in Central Europe and Central Eastern Europe, we have 27,000 people, and we are, I guess, the largest US investor here in the region, and we are not going out. So, and our experience here is overall pretty positive. So 22 manufacturing sites, 5 R&Ds. So it is not anymore only about manufacturing. You know, the investments when we started here in 90s, the first investment was buying Tungsram in Hungary, a lighting company. We are still there in that. And it was going more from simple manufacturing to more advanced manufacturing, ending now producing part of the gas turbines in Hungary, high-end water filtration equipment, which is headquartered in Hungary and a lot of patents there, or producing aviation engine, which I think everybody would agree that this is a high-end product here in GV Aviation, Czech. But now adding engineering, 2,000 engineers working here, R&Ds, and also business services recently starting in Hungary. So, you know, there were times where GE was buying globally about 400 companies a year, so this is something like more than one a day. And the portfolios are always shifting, so I'm sure that also in 10 years maybe the GE will look a little bit different here because the development will be different. But overall, I think that pretty strong track record, and we have a strong commitment to the region. So much about the past. I think that there was a question from the forum, hey, we should talk more about the future. You know, in a pretty volatile time now where there is not that many good news coming from media and TV, we are somehow forgetting that it's exactly 25 years since the transformation of the economy started here. And actually, at least from maybe more distance perspective and global perspective, it was one of the most successful transformation which part of the geographies like Central Europe ever did. And particularly when you look on that, how difficult those attempts are in the other parts of the world. Shifting to more democracy, getting economy reformed. And there were times between 2001, 2008, when the Central Europe was the third fastest growing region globally after China and India. So, good track record. The question is now how the phase 2 will look like. What we want to see next 20 years. And maybe I give you, throw it in the discussion perspective from a major investor here. You know, what changed since 2008, that the world is as competitive as it never was. People are competing for jobs, companies are competing for the best people working for them. You compete with your products for the customers heavily. Countries are competing for investments. And we, without the company, compete for the capital allocation within company as well. So there is a tough discussion in the company like GE where the investment goes. Where do we put a priority? Is it going to Central Europe? Is it a good location? Or we put it in China, or where it goes? You know, when Jeff Immel, our CEO, says that the biggest currency now you have is the government is jobs. Everybody wants jobs. Everybody wants investments. So the biggest issue I see in Central Europe for the next phase is dramatically increased competitiveness. Because the region is in the fight for the investors' attention, right? And the numbers are big. I just give you a little bit of GE numbers. So we generate here in the region, Central Europe, which is 20 countries. I mean, we see it in a bit broader scope. $4 billion revenues just in the market. We export $7 billion out. Just add it together. Put the taxes, what our employees pay and we pay. We just purchased the services in the region and products for another $1 billion. When you take Hungary, GE generates 2.7 national GDP, right? So it is not just a trading volume, it's the overall impact what the companies like us can create here. So what is my opinion and our opinion really now has to come on top of what we do. Yes, value-added manufacturing, we have a good example of that. R&D has to be more focused, but there are a few other things. One of the biggest topics why the region is not progressing fast enough on the competitiveness is the topics like institutional efficiency, right? So how the governance work here, sometimes transparency, predictability. It's not, I mean, it's better than in India. It's much better in the developed world. but it's not good enough, and you really want to be attractive investment destination. Because the miracle of the low cost or reasonable cost will fade away. It will not stay forever, right? So that's one. You know, governments, I'm not supposed to talk about politics, right? And my father was, I am not, and we generally never comment on politics. But the fact is that governments come and go, we stay, right? And what we would like to see as an investor, and probably many others, that there is a clearer vision in the region, and particularly in the Czech Republic. What should the next 10 years look like? What will drive that country to success? What is the edge? And that the vision stay beyond one government. You know, there was a discussion about Poland and Czech Republic. In the time that Poland had 3 governments, we managed 9 here. So less continuity, right? So that's another topic. I mean, regulatory environment. We see too many patchwork here in the region. That one regulatory doesn't fit into another, it's too fast, or sometimes extremely slow. So, or even attempt of retrospective regulatory in some countries, not here in Czech. This is what you as an investor doesn't want to see, right? And I think that part of it is that people see too much locally and less thinking out what really how the investors will perceive certain moves, and that's pretty important. Play regional card much stronger, right? Because many people ask me, what do you think about, you know, what GE thinks about Czech Republic? You know, the reality is, and I think Vladimír said it partly, no news, good news, but the fact is that the size of our economy is economy of medium-sized US city, right? Or large-sized US city. So at least in GE, we never speak, and I never speak when talk about investment about country itself. I speak about the region. When you put Visegrad 4 together, and there was discussion about future of that regional thinking, where it goes, it's the 15th economy in the world already. So V4 with the 65 million is economy number 15 on the global list. Looks much more attractive than 5 million Slovakia, right? When you go broader actually, and you add Balkans and all the south part, it would be economy which is between China size and India, so it's larger than India, with 130 million people. Sounds much more attractive. So I think what is also very important that businesses, but also countries here, think about how to brand itself and how to sell that message better, that region looks more attractive for the investors. Because, you know, there is a lot of advantages we can, small means could be fast, could be flexible, all pretty good. But one thing you lack is size of the market. And that, at least in perception, can be through smart communication and a good positioning of the region done much better. And there is a lot of common interest actually that the region has. So, you know, there are a lot of differences, but there are issues where high share of manufacturing, common theme for everybody, need for a new market, common theme for everybody. US could be an opportunity. I think it's the same picture. US is not as strong as EU as a trading partner. Innovation topic, same for everybody. Energy security, energy efficiency, big topic, everybody. I mean, policies are pretty messy. And again, we need to strengthen our voice in Europe and in the world to push our common interest. So we are a big fan and thought leader, I would say, also with American Chamber of Commerce to work more on that regional thinking and finding a framework how we can, at least on the economic areas, work together. I think that would be, for me, I would be glad if there are questions also coming from the audience, and that we have also some discussion and not only monologues here.
Thank you very, very much. So, please, the audience. So, we are looking forward for your questions. So, is there anybody who wants to raise the first question? We have a limited time, but I would like to at least to have 2-3 questions to colleagues from the audience. Where is IBM? IBM is departed. IBM does not have any question. Comment. Jiří Schneider, and IBM will be ready in a minute.
Jiří Schneider, I would like to draw on what Peter Stračár has said about the branding of the region. And we've heard a little bit of skepticism about the cohesion of the region, political cohesion of the region. So how would you overcome this? Is it possible to overcome this? Because from obvious reasons, this is the way to go, to brand the region as a bigger entity. At the same time, it's divided, it's a different environment. So would you please comment on this? Anyone from the panel?
John Glenn.
Can I pick up and echo my friend Jiří's comment and ask you, I mean, it seems that I know how you can add up the figures of the 4 countries in the Visegrad country, but it seems that they often instead are competing for investments rather than sort of working in the sort of manner that you would imply as if it was more like a common market. So I would be interested more in your thoughts on that too.
Yeah, maybe I can give you more internal perspective how we think about it, and because obviously our teams here, we do a lot of branding inside the company to keep the interest high and push investments here. So, you know, one is that we're seeing more in the clustering things. So we are not putting, and probably will not do actually, putting the same infrastructure in every country. And it gives you a little bit how the country can brand itself. So we are building here an aviation cluster, and this is built in Czech and in Poland, and probably this is where it will stay, because you build infrastructure already, you have engineering with people, so there is a corner of investment which is laying around aviation, and that can be further built and put more investment there, right? You then have cluster of the things which we build around Hungary, and again, this is where the other things are coming. So you really look what are the best opportunities and best skills and best technology in certain countries, and you focus on that, right? But we still talk, when we talk about investment and particularly about opportunity here, we talk about energy market in Central Europe, where in which areas, we talk about healthcare market, but we rarely go in the depths of individual countries, right? And it simplifies the things, but it also helps to us structure better and not to have a duplicated structures. It goes across the borders, but it also makes it understandable and more attractive actually if you fight for in-house investment in your region, right? So and I think that also what countries can do, that you don't try to do everything, but you really focus on your strengths, and we had a lot of discussion about R&D investments, for example, and Weston was talking about that. If you take 2% of R&D, and I think this is a Czech figure somewhere around that, and you take it out of our GDP, it's a very different number when the US take 2% of R&D. And actually the cost of developing things is not that different, right? So you can run significantly less programs from your overall budget in the same percentage than the large country. That's why you need a focus. There, and I think that focus can be different in Hungary, it can be different in Czech, it doesn't have to, you know, and there can be even better cooperation, the things, because why to compete in everything? Because not everybody has the same strengths. So, and that's how you can brand actually. But I think the best brand is when you can get is investment-friendly country. Fast, simple, reliable. And I think that this is the biggest piece what has to be done.
Overcoming this Central European differences?
Look, you know, there is obviously the structure of some industry is different. I think that Czech economy has a great start position. We lacked a little bit of speed, and I think in the recent year, partly domestically done, I guess it's more than crisis. I think that Poland has advantage of scale and size. It's the sixth largest economy in Europe, but I think that they did a good job in last 6-7 years in pushing through institutional reforms, being more stable. One government, I think 6 years in place. So, yeah, I think that there could be learning from different parts. I think Hungary does, on one, some things which makes investor nervous, but there are also pretty good practices in Hungary how to attract industrial investments, where I think Czech can do better. You know, nobody, you know, I would wish that the government knocks more on G doors here and say, hey, what we can do that you invest more money here? It doesn't happen, right? So yeah, that's what I would say, right? So a lot of similarities, and each country has slightly different edge and strengths, and there could be common learning.
Can I just make one comment to that?
I would ask for the last two questions from the audience, and then we all can sum up. So Milena Jaburkova from IBM, and then the gentleman in front.
My question goes to the panelist. Peter Stračár, I like your talk about investments and business role as integrator of the Europe. But unfortunately, I have a feeling that the development goes the other way around. And how realistic is that the European Union will disintegrate? Thanks.
Yeah. That's the question.
The last question.
Yeah.
Good morning. Maybe it's still morning. It's more like noon. My name is Jaroslav Nemec. I'm from J&T Bank. I'm ex-PricewaterhouseCoopers and Ernst & Young. I'd like to ask, what are the main risks and threats in the regions that are perceived by potential investors? Because we've heard about the structural challenges. We've heard about structure of the market. But there have been talks on circulating for the past several years, really about transparency, corruption, and regulation. So I'd like to some of your comments on these topics. Thank you.
Okay, so we should sum up now. So GNT has a question about corruption, IBM about whether you have some concerns about the future of the euro market, and then maybe Wes, or why some U.S. companies has withdrawn from Central Europe as a general. And last one, I think, Vladimír, to end up with a positive, how to stimulate the Czech to be more fighters and less savers as a political question. So maybe, Wes, you could start, and Peter and Vladimír is the last.
Okay. So I'll try to address all the questions that sort of were pointed towards the panel. How to get the region to think more as a region? I think it's going to have to. I mean, if you talk to businesses in Ústí nad Labem, their economic zone is, Dresden is more important to it than Prague. If you look at Ostrava, it's Poland, yeah, and how the region of Poland that's north of the border. The mayor of Brno told me, and I think he's wrong, but he told me that Vienna is a more important city than Prague is, and I think that's just because he's from Brno and he doesn't want Prague to be the most important city. And I also think that it's strategically wrong. Businesses look at things from an economic perspective. Yeah, they look at economic regions, and the national borders of the Central Europe don't actually fit comfortably into economic regions. And so the question shouldn't be, how are they going to do it, but why haven't they already started thinking about that? Because how Dresden and that area develops, what its economic policies are far more important to that region of the country than what they're doing in Brno. yeah, or what the national strategy is for Brno. So it has to happen, and I suppose we just need to be more convincing about the fact that that has to happen. I suppose I should address the issue of, you know, what are the major risks. The major risks for companies when they come over here, they read the headlines, right? I mean, they get the fleet sheet. So they see all of the articles about government dysfunction and government corruption. So yes, it's a major issue. And I will tell you that I think that the myth of corruption is far greater than the reality of corruption in this country. I think that there's a lot of inefficient decisions that are being made, and people are accusing the government of being corrupt when they're just making bad decisions. Yeah? Nonetheless, the issue of corruption, the perception of corruption, is an issue that the Czech Republic has to address. And let me say, his predecessor, Mr. Kužel, always used to come back at me by saying, but the U.S. is corrupt too. Yes. And I would tell him, I was a reporter in the U.S., so if you want to compare stories about how the U.S. is corrupt, I've got more of them than you do. Yeah? And it's a problem for the U.S. as well. And it's one that needs to be addressed in the U.S., especially at the municipal level, and that's what I think the Czech Republic is politely saying to the U.S. government in TTIP when it says you need to address your municipal issues with the Buy USA programs. Yes, it does. Yeah? It's an investment problem for the U.S. in attracting Czech investment if they are excluded from municipal tenders in the U.S. So it has to be resolved. On the same side, it's a big issue here. The other big issue for the Czech Republic is the court system. And I can tell you now the biggest issue, every major investor is looking at what's happening to Brno, yeah? And in the bankruptcy case, because there is a bankruptcy extortion ring that exists in this country. It does exist, and it involves former high-level politicians. And the message that we've gotten from the Ministry of Justice is they can't do anything about it. And my question to the Ministry of Justice is that really what you want me to tell foreign investors? Yeah? I've got the letter here. It's not something, and it's not something we're telling foreign investors. But the court systems have to function better. Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, you know, in business, I always prefer to talk about opportunities and not risk. Those things are merit, right? So, in the end, right? I see the biggest opportunity for the region exactly to move on the couple of the things. Better institution, faster, more flexible, more competitive. That's a huge opportunity. Not doing that is a major and the biggest risk for the region from the economic perspective, because in 10 years we will end up in the mediocrity. You are not most productive, you are not the fastest, you are not the most innovative, and this is not a strong value proposition. And that's opportunity and risk. So I think this is the role of the businesses in partnership with the organization like American Chamber of Commerce and the other chambers and the government now to really push those topics hard, that there is a strong understanding what the business requires. We can do, major company like GE, the rest we can do. We can find the people, we can hire, we have money, we can move, right? So we need a framework. Now to European Union, look, I don't know. I cannot comment on that. I can't read what will happen 10 years, but I think that Europe has a strong value proposition. It is the strongest economy globally. We just need to play it better. And again, it is on the role of the government, but also businesses to be very clear on that. And we believe in open market. We believe in open flow of capital and competition. And building barriers is not a recipe to grow. And that, I think, has to be very clear to everybody. So, and you not grow, you are done as an economy, because all other things follow. So.
Okay. Let me try to summarize some or answer some of the questions. It's not easy. A special question on Europe would require a specific seminar on its own. The Sasha's question was how to dynamize the Czech society, which is traditionally skeptical and highly risk-averse. A, we will always be like that. We are not Poles, we are not Italians, we are not Hungarians, whatever. B, let's not be too much sad about it. Even societies develop and live in the cycle. Poland is riding on the upper side of the cycle, but if you look back at the history of Poland, whenever they were down, they were much deeper down than we ever were, maybe with some few exceptions. I believe that our society is now at the beginning of the recovery within this cycle. And as I already hinted, it's probably the good luck of this government, the bad luck of the previous one in terms of timing when they were in the office. I would like to, because you could discuss it ad infinitum, I would like to pick up 2 points. First, what Peter said. I believe that Czech society needs to look more, or to start to look less locally, really become to be more open. We are critical on Europe. If you speak to Poles, even the top representatives in private, they have the very same reservations and the very same criticism as we have. But one of the additional positive impetus for the relative Polish success is that they were able to use very much the opportunity which Europe gave. And you know, for me, all these bloody European funds, this is something which disturbs my mental circles. I don't like them, but they are here, and we were not able to use them. Poles are able to wash their dirty laundry only inside, while we do it outside. We are not able to be compact enough when we are speaking outside. Even in Brussels, whatever reservations I might have about it. Look what has happened with our new commissioner. I refused to comment it yesterday because I consider it to be a shame. And I'm critical, I'm more Eurosceptic. But it's a reality, and we should learn this lesson, and it's also, it's valid for me like for everybody else. We should learn better the lesson how Poles were able to use this opportunity. And again, I could continue much about it. Weston mentioned couple of points. Corruption, the perception of corruption vis-à-vis the reality in corruption. The fact that foreigners are more dependent on the images, and if Eric's best flea cheat is an image, then we should maybe something do about it. Why the hell don't we have our own governmental English spoken flea cheat, for instance, etc.?
Eric won't be happy about that.
No, he won't be happy about it. I'm pretty sure. All right, so we should do something about the image. And the particular points, be it the court system, be it the corruption, be it the public procurement law, be it this and that, this is what I'm calling belongs to these minimal points which every government since the beginning of the years after 2000, 2001, everybody has it in its program. So let's do it. That's the point. Let's make some progress. Well, I will not speak about Europe. I'm going to say Europe is going to survive, but it will be the second best. It will be the slow growth, and the future generations are going to pay for the mistakes from the 1990s. But as a small country, I don't believe that we should, for instance, wish the breakup of Europe, because I believe that the impacts on our economy would be immense, and I just simply don't want to see it. We probably should be able to find a rather fragile balance between our natural and traditional skepticism towards the European development on one side, and to take again the example from the Poles, who were able at the same time to pick up most from Europe. I could mention on the TTIP. I'm very sorry. That's a point I should have mentioned in my main presentation. Yes, that's a problem on its own. Again, This is not negotiated by the Czech Republic, it is negotiated by the EU. And again, let's look how we were not able to use at maximum our negotiation before the entry into the EU, and how Poles were more successful. So let's watch it very closely, and I'm very glad that I see a government or non-governmental institutions started to organize during this autumn discussions and conferences on this. Because of the lack of the time, let me make one more general comment on the marriage Czech-US. You know, it is like if a giant marriages a dwarf. And let me give you, to conclude, my personal experience. I started as the economic minister in the first post-Velvet Revolution government in December '89. I was very naive. You know, the US was the beacon. I naively believed that we can transform Central European society within the more liberal US type of the societies. Then there was a sobering out. And today I believe, and I'm skeptical about this, it's not about economics. It's not even about a foreign policy, and I wish that our foreign policy is much more cooperating with the US. It's about the structure of the type of the society. This is a society which will never be of the American type. And we are traditionally rooted in the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, and I'm becoming, maybe it's because I'm too old already, I'm becoming to the conclusion that this society will sooner or later develop in some kind of a corporativist, Bavarian, Austrian type of the society, which will suffer from all the problems which those societies suffer, which will develop along some type of the social market which are ideas which we have seen to govern the German, Austrian, and some other countries' development during the whole period after the Second World War. I personally don't want to see it. I would wish to see much flexible society, but from this point of view, especially after I have run through the country in the presidential campaign in 2012, in a smaller campaign, but very much business-oriented in the first half of this year before my election to the president of the Chamber of Commerce. I really went through all the country once again. I spoke to small, big entrepreneurs. And I'm strongly convinced that we will end up as some type of a relatively well-living, but not too dynamic and very corporativist society of the German type. And then, as a food for thought, even for our American friends, as a matter of fact, if I see the latest American development, if I see the power of the East Coast liberals, and if I see the Obama administration, and if I see the polarization within the US political life, I would be, if I was an American, I would probably be a traditional Republican voter. But I despise very much Tea Party, not very often for what it says, but the way how it pursues its policies. So even the big beacon from the very beginning, I have a question, where the hell is US heading in the last years at all? And maybe this is a nice point to finish.
Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen. I think give them a warm applause. Thank you. I think it was great. And now, look, we do have almost an hour for not the French, I would say rather classic American lunch with the sandwiches just in the room and the courtyard. And we'll meet again here at 2 p.m. with the panel on the hard power. So tea lunch party now and then back to work. Thank you very much.